Imagine a world one can only describe as hell. Clouds of sulfuric acid move at the speed of sound. Lead and even zinc melt here. Sulfur evaporates here. And even carbon dioxide turns into something that modern physics can't explain. Is it a distant exoplanet millions of light years away? No, this is Venus. And we can see this hell every day when looking at the sky. And this is a real hell, even though it seems so tiny. It's hard to imagine a place that would be so incompatible with life. But is it so? Or not? The recent discoveries stirred up in the scientific community and rekindled its interest in Venus. Are there really new theories explaining the origin of those strange creatures taken by the station on the planet's surface half a century ago? Wait a minute, did I say creatures? You've heard that right. I know, this does sound intriguing. So let's embark on this exciting journey. What was found on Venus? For a long time, Venus and Earth were considered sisters, as they are similar to each other and very close. Indeed, our closest neighbor has a lot in common with Earth. Venus is the second brightest and most visible object in the night sky after the moon. It's funny that Venus doesn't have a discoverer, which is precisely because of its high visibility and brightness. It's impossible to say who discovered Venus first and when it happened. However, we do know the names of the first researchers of the planet. Venus is so close to us that even a small telescope would be enough to track the shift in planetary phases. Galileo was the first to do this. And on June 6, 1761, Mikhail Lomonosov found out that Venus has an atmosphere when the planet passed across the sun's disk. And only then did astronomers find out more and more interesting details about it. The closest distance from Earth to Venus is 38 million kilometers, and the farthest is 261 million kilometers. To put this into perspective, the minimum distance from Earth to Mars is 56 million kilometers. Therefore, Venus is still the closest planet to us, although there is a false belief that the closest neighbor is Mars. The diameter of Venus is 12,104 kilometers, which is only 600 kilometers shorter than the Earth's diameter, and the gravity force is almost the same as on our planet. A kilogram on Venus will weigh 850 grams. In terms of chemical composition, the planet is similar to Earth. It's just as rocky and has the same chemical elements. Venus has no satellites and is rather rare for the planets of the solar system. Besides Venus, only Mercury doesn't have a satellite. There's even a theory suggesting that in the distant past, Mercury could have been Venus's satellite, but then they parted ways. If Venus had smaller satellites, it could have only been in the distant past, and they probably fell on its surface a long time ago. There's nothing out of the ordinary here. A similar fate awaits Mars's satellite, Phobos. After 50 million years, it will either fall on Mars's surface or be destroyed by tidal forces and form rings like the ones near Saturn. There is no clarity with satellites, but something big did fall on Venus, and more than once. All craters on Venus are very large, at least 2 kilometers in diameter. This is because only large meteorites can reach the planet's surface through the dense Venusian atmosphere. The rest will inevitably collapse and burn out. An analysis of the radar maps of Venus showed that its surface is quite young. 90% is covered with solidified basaltic lava. In fact, huge plains formed as a result of volcanic activity. Approximately 300 to 500 million years ago, the planet experienced some kind of event that caused almost its entire surface to be flooded with lava flows. There are still thousands of active volcanoes on Venus, and the highest mountains reach a mark of 11.3 kilometers. This is almost 2.5 kilometers higher than our Everest. But in general, Venus's relief is quite typical for planets like Earth. But that's as far as the similarities go. Venus has its own peace of mind, and in many ways, it's not like everyone else. It rotates around its axis in the opposite direction as other planets in the solar system, from east to west, and it's very strange. Only one other planet, Uranus, rotates in such a way. It takes Venus as much as 243 Earth days to complete one rotation around its axis, but its orbiting period around the Sun is only 225 Earth days. It turns out that a day on Venus lasts longer than a year. Although rare, there is a chance of day and night on the planet. However, the seasons aren't even meant to change. Venus has almost no axial tilt, just a little more than 2 degrees. But the conditions on the planet make Venus, if not Earth's sister, then certainly its second cousin. What can hardly be called a Venusian climate was perfectly described by Dante. If there is a hell, then it's certainly on Venus. The Venusian atmosphere consists mainly of carbon dioxide, which accounts for 96.5% of its volume, and nitrogen. It's extremely dense, and so the atmospheric pressure on the surface is just mind-blowing. It's 90 times higher than on Earth at sea level. This is roughly equivalent to the pressure found at a depth of 1 kilometer in Earth's oceans. But that's in the ocean, and on Venus, such pressure is on the surface. The whopping atmospheric pressure leads to some interesting phenomena in the lower layers of the atmosphere. It literally presses carbon dioxide into the surface with such force that it takes on the exotic properties of a supercritical fluid. This is a special state of aggregation, which is neither a gas nor a liquid and has properties of both. Such an enormous amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere creates a devastating greenhouse effect. The surface temperature reaches 470 degrees Celsius. This is enough to melt lead, tin, and even zinc. Winds blowing at the level of the highest Venusian clouds reach 380 kilometers per hour. Clouds take 4 Earth days to complete a full circle around the planet due to the strong winds blowing constantly. At the surface, the wind speed is much lower, reaching only a few kilometers per hour. But because the atmospheric density is so high, this speed is enough to easily carry dust and pebbles over the surface like a slow water flow. Venusian clouds are very dense and consist of sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid droplets. They reflect about 75% of sunlight and completely hide the planet's surface. Therefore, we can't see Venus's relief with optical tools, but only in other wavelengths. Venus is constantly subjected to heavy acid rain, and these aren't acid rains that concern environmentalists on Earth. These rains are almost pure, concentrated sulfuric acid. What's interesting is that they never reach the surface, but evaporate due to enormous heat, forming the Virga phenomenon. One can often see this effect when observing rains on Earth. Presumably, such a large amount of sulfur entered the planet's atmosphere thanks to intensive volcanic activity. But the high temperature didn't allow sulfur to form solid compounds on the surface, because sulfur melts at only 112.8 degrees Celsius and evaporates at 444.6 degrees Celsius. Fire, heat, brimstone. This perfectly matches the description of hell given in the Bible. That's That's why the maximum operating time of the automatic interplanetary station on the surface of Venus was only 127 minutes. And it was still an outstanding achievement by that time. Wait, what? Stations landed in this inferno? Yes, and more than once. The first landing took place in 1970. Many of your parents weren't even born yet. But back to Venus. The Soviet station Venera 7 was the first to land and collect data on Venus. It didn't last long. The infernal conditions destroyed it in less than an hour. On the surface itself, the device lasted only 20 minutes. 2 years later, the Venera 8 mission was already able to take soil samples and analyze them on site. Then there were several more missions, and finally, the Venera 13 station made the first ever sound recording from the Venusian surface. Listen closely using your headphones. It's really mesmerizing. It sounds like a completely different world. For the first time ever, this station could capture and transmit to Earth a colored image of this hellish planet's surface. Do I need to mention what kind of hype this picture created in the scientific community back then? What came next was even more intriguing. So intriguing that many scientists preferred to take a skeptical approach rather than have their worldview completely challenged. But first, let's fast forward to our time for a moment. In September 2020, the media exploded with eye-catching headlines such as, "Scientists have discovered signs of life on Venus," and other pretentious phrases. Let's see what all this hype was about. An international team of astronomers has provided evidence that traces of phosphine, a toxic gas produced only by anaerobic bacteria on Earth, was found in the upper Venusian clouds. So far, scientists haven't discovered a single natural process that could produce phosphine. That is, once again, a gas was found on Venus, which appears only as a bacterial waste product. And science doesn't know of any other ways of how it can be formed besides the processes in gas giants. But this certainly doesn't have anything to do with Venus. The evidence proving the presence of phosphine was quite convincing, and it came as a big surprise. A research paper about this was published in Nature Astronomy. Jean Greaves, a team leader and astronomer at Cardiff University, said, "There is a chance we have found the evidence of organisms living in the clouds of Venus. It's very interesting and unexpected." Do I need to explain what journalists did with this statement? Jane's colleague Sarah Seeger of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology had to clarify this. We don't claim to have found life on Venus. We only claim to have found phosphine gas, whose origin is still a mystery. But this story took a trivial turn. Quite quickly, scientists understood why phosphine was found in the Venusian clouds, and these reasons turned out to be extremely boring. In their new study, scientists from Cornell University claim that phosphine can be an important geological find, indicating the presence of explosive volcanoes on the mysterious planet. Using the James Clerk Maxwell Telescope and the Atacama Large Millimeter Wave Array, ALMA, experts concluded phosphine indeed entered Venus's upper atmosphere through volcanism. Was this a disappointment? Not at all. All this hype surrounding phosphine bleaks away when considering the much more obvious signs of life discovered at the very start of research. Please, don't be blown away by this, but you saw these signs with your own eyes a couple of minutes ago. You see, but do not observe, as Sherlock Holmes would say. We've shown you pictures of Venus's surface taken by the Soviet automatic station. Did you notice anything unusual? Take a closer look now. This, or that. Do you still think there's nothing special? Well, don't. These artifacts were once a subject of heated scientific debates, and some prominent scientists went as far as to suggest that these were in fact living beings. Some unknown life form. Apparently, these artifacts were acting too strangely. Yes, they were acting. The station took a whole series of pictures that revealed that the artifacts were moving. They appeared and disappeared, changed shape, and generally stood out against the background of the Venusian stones. These objects were given funny names, mimicking the names of terrestrial animals. But the real star in this Venusian documentary is the Scorpion object. It came into view at about the 90th minute, along with a half ring close to it on the right. Once again, it came into view. At first, it wasn't there. But what caught the scientists' attention was its strange appearance. They immediately assumed this was some kind of detail that fell from the collapsing apparatus. But then the device would quickly fail due to the extreme overheating of the sealed compartment. Given the enormous atmospheric pressure, hot air would have instantly penetrated it. However, Venera 13 continued to operate normally for another hour, which means that the object wasn't a part of the device. According to the technical documentation, all outdoor operations, including dropping the sensor's covers and cameras, drilling the soil, and working the measuring cone, ended half an hour after landing. Nothing else came off the apparatus. And in the next pictures, the Scorpion is missing. The Scorpion was about 17 centimeters long and had a complex structure reminiscent of terrestrial insects or arachnids. Its shape cannot result from a random combination of dark and light dots. The image of the Scorpion contains 940 pixels, and the whole picture has 2.08 times 10 to the 5th power pixels. The probability of such a random combination of dots is infinitesimally small, less than 10 to the power of minus 100. In other words, the chance that the Scorpion appeared by accident can be ruled out. In addition, it casts a distinct shadow, and therefore, it's a real object and not an artifact. The most active supporter of interpreting these oddities as complex Venusian life was Russian scientist Leonid Xonformalidi from the Space Research Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences. But even deep skepticism wouldn't allow one to accuse him of dilettantism. This is because Xonformalidi was a part of the team that designed the equipment installed at the station of the Venusian mission. Like no one else, he perfectly knew the capabilities of the electronics that landers were equipped with. The Scorpion wasn't the only strange dynamic object found in a series of images of the Venusian surface, and there could have been even more if it wasn't for one strange incident during the experiment. In one of his articles, Xonformalidi expressed regret and bewilderment at an ill-advised decision of one of the members of the Venera 13 mission team. According to the scientist, the descent vehicle worked for a record-breaking long time and would continue to transmit more data. But at the 127th minute, someone stopped the transmission. It's not clear who did it and why, but someone on Earth immediately sent the command to turn off the orbiter's receiver, although the descent vehicle continued to send signals. Was it done to prevent the receiver's batteries from running out? But didn't the descent vehicle have priority? Xonformalidi wondered. What else would we see if the station continued the transmission? We will never know for sure. But we'll learn much more when humanity returns to Venus, and we believe this will certainly happen.